Hello, my name is Cameron Schultz, and I want to welcome you to Western State Hospital. What you see behind me is now the Blackburn Inn, a very high-end hotel. But once upon a time, this place wasn't so nice, chipper, and cheery. This was the site of Western State Hospital, which opened in 1832 and operated until 1976. Over here, about maybe a half a mile, is a very large area that speaks to the hospital's true history. A 3,000 grave cemetery, which will be shown to you at some point during this short documentary. Today, we'll be going to several abandoned buildings and using buildings that are being used on this campus. I will explain to you some of the history that surrounds this mysterious facility. But to start, let's talk about the hospital's superintendent, the one that held his tenure the longest, 47 years to be exact. Dr. Joseph Spencer DeJarnett came to this hospital in the early 1900s, and he became superintendent within a matter of years. Dr. DeJarnett was a prominent member of the eugenics movement, which meant sterilizing the race, basically, by removing racial impurity or racial, mental, and other genetic impurities completely out of the race by sterilizing the mentally unfit. That was done at this hospital. Several hundred thousand forced sterilization procedures were performed in the facility you see behind me. There is also, behind this building, sits a treatment facility where the most heinous of mental barbaric treatments were done. Electroconvulsive therapy, lobotomies, among other things like insulin shock therapies, ice baths, and Thorazine treatments were all done at this facility during its lifetime. The hospital closed in 1976 and moved to another location within the same city, and then closed down from that location and moved a second time to its current location. It is one of the few mental state hospitals that did stay state-run during the deinstitutionalization age in the United States. Since its closing, this facility has been used as a prison, and now most recently, apartment buildings and a hotel. The prison operated from 1983 to 2002. One of the things that you'll see on many of the buildings is interesting ironwork on the windows, and some of the windows you can see have been half bricked up completely. These are the buildings that were used as prisons. Only 2 of the 22 buildings on site were used as a prison. There were 3 watchtowers that were built to accommodate the prison. One at the front entrance over here to my right, one at the very back of the property to my left, one at the very, very back of the property directly behind me. All 3 are still standing to this day. You'll see one of them in one of my short clips where I talk about the brief history behind that tower. Dr. Joseph DeJarnett, after he was still superintendent of this facility for about 20 years, he lobbied for a semi-private sanitarium to be opened on the other side of Staunton, Virginia. This facility was built and named the DeJarnett Sanitarium in his honor. It was later turned into the DeJarnett Center for Human Development, used primarily for the treatment of children in its later years. Dr. DeJarnett remained superintendent of both facilities. Dr. DeJarnett was known to do some very barbaric treatments, including taking blood from hyperactive children and injecting it into depressed children in the hopes that the good blood would kill off the bad blood in the child's body. As a result, many children ended up contracting blood-borne diseases and pathogens, including autoimmune diseases where their bodies would reject the blood given to it, as at that time there was no such thing as blood transfusions or blood types. Dr. Jarnett died a very lonely man, and it was later found that he was a Nazi sympathizer. He had paperwork proving this. Nazi propaganda, to be exact. Now you know a brief history of the superintendent of the hospital. Now let's talk about the actual history of the facility itself for a moment. This facility was meant to house just over 800 patients. Like most mental facilities of the times, it was subject to overcrowding. Several hospitals within the state and nation were going well beyond their intended capacity. One hospital in particular was meant to house only 300 patients, but was in its peak housing over 5,000 of them. This facility, as mentioned before, was meant to house 800 patients. At its peak, it was housing over 3.5 thousand. Over 3,500, excuse me. That was at its absolute peak. This hospital has been subject to many, many cruel and unusual treatments. Dr. Walter Freeman, the inventor of the prefrontal lobotomy and transorbital lobotomy, would come here frequently to perform his miracle procedure, rendering most patients vegetables for the rest of their life. The procedure involved taking an ice pick looking device and inserting it beyond the eyelid, taking a hammer, pounding it through the eye socket, taking this device, putting it into the brain, and severing the connection between the frontal lobe and the upper thalamus of the brain, effectively rendering the patient completely in a vegetative state. They could not eat, they could not move, they could not function. This procedure was seen as one of the many horrors to ever enter through this facility's doors. And as mentioned before, there is a 3,000 grave cemetery behind this facility, which tells you many patients walked through those very doors, but never walked back out. So behind me you can see here the old chapel building. This is as you can see over here to the left, you can look up here and you can see that some of the building has actually begun to settle downward and possibly even upward. There's some cracks in the brick there and whatnot, which do suggest building settling. If you look up here on the third floor window, you see that it's got some wood in front of the window. That's actually because up in that third floor, there is an old church organ in there, and that organ is very, very old, and it's still set up like a church in there from what I understand. They haven't changed anything. There's still pews and whatnot inside. It's supposed to be very, very pretty. And to the back of the camera, which you should be seeing on screen in a moment, is actually what is now the Blackburn Inn, which was a dormitory, which is where I am actually staying until tomorrow. And it's a very, very pretty place, very, very aesthetically pleasing, if you will. Very, very pretty place to stay. I love it. I've enjoyed my stay. I will continue to enjoy my stay, especially as long as I'm out here filming this place. But yeah, so right here would on this first floor would have been staff dining, and that would have been for the doctors, nurses, and whatnot, staff dining. And on the second floor, not too much information on what's on the second floor, but on the third floor is where the chapel is located, as you can see by the pointed windows, which are typical of a chapel. Also on the you can't really see on camera, I don't think, but these windows are actually stained a yellowish color. They're stained glass, but not the typical stained glass that you would tend to see in a church. Still very pretty, still very, very beautiful building. It's unfortunate that it's begun to settle the way it has. As you can see with the bricks there, starting to break all the way up there. It's actually kind of sad to see. Yeah, that's chapel building. So behind me here, you can see one of the dormitories that was later converted into a prison. when this facility was used as a prison from 1981 to 2002. And this was obviously before they decided that the conditions at this particular facility were inadequate for for prison inmate health and safety, and it was proven to be hazardous, so they moved the facility to another location entirely. If you look right here, you'll see that this is all caged in. This is all caged in because they were concerned about inmates sneaking out through the ducting that you see here, and like through the kitchen and whatnot. And you can see this is a very large building. It goes several more hundred yards that way, and it also goes quite a ways back here. And just off camera, there's another building here also used for the corrections facility. Unfortunately, I have not yet gained legal access to these buildings. I'm not going to be gaining illegal access because I don't want to get thrown out of here. But like I say, you can see that all this was all ironed up, per se. So when this facility closed in 2002, these buildings have not been touched since that time. Not even by the construction crews here that are renovating many of the buildings on site here, unfortunately. So what you see here is what you get, pretty much. And if you were to walk back here, beyond this little retaining wall, there's a door that goes into a tiled room, which would have been the cafeteria for the inmates and the patients when this was a dormitory, and also when it was part of the prison complex, which I believe totaled up to 3 buildings. I'm not 100% sure. Fact check me if you need to. There's a watchtower over there, which I used for a filming location in a either earlier or later clip. And over here you see, just off camera, there's a garage, it looks like, of some kind of bay doors. And it's quite crazy to see that this has been abandoned since 2002, hasn't been touched in that long and that many years, and it's pretty crazy. It's quite pretty in a very weird and eerie way. It's rather pretty since this has been here since the hospital was built in the 1850s. Excuse me, the 1830s rather. And it's what's amazing to me is that it's still standing up strong. And these buildings, unless they're knocked down, they're not coming down. That is for sure. They'll come down on their own accord. In fact, they won't fall down at all. Most of these buildings are structurally sound except for like 3 on campus. It's amazing, and I love this place. But yeah, this would have been for the inmates, and rumors going around. No, there's no factual basis to this that we know of, but this was supposedly the criminally insane unit when it was part of Western State Hospital, because that's why the prison chose to use this location as the actual prison where the inmates were kept, because it was already sort of set up and divided into cells, and they didn't have to do a whole lot to it to make it adequate for the prisoners. So pretty crazy, pretty cool. Yeah, and I love the brickwork. Brickwork's absolutely beautiful. If you look at it, it's very ornate. There's a lot of really beautiful brickwork on this building, and the roof has also been redone recently, because they are planning on redoing this building in the near future. What they're going to use it for, I have no clue. But it'd be really neat to see what they do with it in the near future. That is really certain. So yes, this was the part of the prison. And of course, when we're talking about making a video about an abandoned former prison and a former mental hospital, what video would be complete without a watchtower? Well, we've got one. A real, honest-to-goodness watchtower right here from the prison era of this hospital, probably built sometime between the year escapes me, 1982 to 2002. Probably built in that time frame somewhere. We're not really sure when, but I'm sure there's records somewhere that say when this watchtower was built. There are 3 of these on the property. There is one right here. The one that's back on this side of it, that's not quite as close to this, we're not really sure where that one is. In fact, the hotel people that work up here, they don't even know exactly where it's located. We have some pictures of it. It's got a bunch of barbed wire fencing around it, but we're not sure where it is. We just know it's back here someplace. And then there's another one way up there by the street. and that one's been renovated and restored, so you can actually go up into it, and maybe I'll film from that location. Maybe I won't. Maybe that clip's already been shown. I have no idea. I haven't done the editing yet. So yeah, this was built during the prison era to prevent prison escapees. And the prison building, which I've already filmed from, I don't know if that clip has been shown just yet, but that is actually directly within line of sight of this watchtower. So with this watchtower, you could see any way that the inmates would be escaping, because all the doors are on this side of the building. The doors on that side were sealed up when it was turned into a prison. And you can actually still see quite a bit of the ironwork from right here where I'm standing. You can see where they added on a fire escape to the building where because there is an elevator in there, but you can see where the stairs are. And I'm looking at them right now, and I'll shoot from this in a moment. And you should be seeing that on screen right now, actually. But yeah, watchtower right here. There you can see a floodlight mounting bracket up there along with a loudspeaker, which actually looks fairly new. It doesn't look all that old. And honestly, I would love to be able to get up into this, but this tape right here, this means off limits. So I am not allowed to get anywhere near this building, anywhere beyond this, actually. So, kind of a shame. But yeah, this is the watchtower, and you can tell because if you're looking at the other buildings over here, and then you're looking at this one, the bricks are different. You can see that the bricks are multicolored. This one's white and this one's black. These are white. There's a bunch of different colored bricks because it was built pretty hastily. They don't match that building over there. So, with that being said, you could definitely tell that these two buildings were built in completely different eras in this hospital's lifespan. Pretty interesting, actually. Very neat point of view from up here. You can see pretty much the whole campus, sort of. No, not really. You can't actually see from up here very far. But you can still see quite a lot. And I'm sure from up there in the watchtower where the guard would have been, guards, plural, you could probably see a whole lot more. So, interesting find. Yeah, watchtower, so nobody could escape the prison when it was a prison. And the thing is, it wasn't a prison for very long. That's the crazy thing. It was, and the rest of the buildings were left abandoned when the prison was used. So there wasn't even, all these other buildings were untouched for like 50 plus years. And they're just now starting to be restored. I think it's really cool to see. Yeah, really neat to see. Lots of cool stuff to see if you ever come here to Staunton. Blackburn Inn. Stay there. It's kind of expensive. Won't say any prices, but Blackburn Inn, service has been great. Rooms have been great. And you get to walk around the grounds. They'll tell you where you can and can't go. And there really aren't a lot of places you can't go on this property. I mean, with the exception of inside the buildings that are not that are still abandoned. Like, this is, you can't get up in here. Obviously, the door's around back that way. I actually walked back there to look at it. Over here, you can walk around and it's safe. But, a lot of the buildings are off limits. But you can walk right up to these buildings. You can walk, some of the windows on the ground floor busted out. I've done it a couple times. Stick your head inside the window and just kind of do a 180. Just kind of see what's going on in that room. And I've done that a few times. And they give you a lot of freedom of movement here. They don't restrict your movement a whole lot, and they they make it clear where you can and can't go. Like, they tell you orange tape, beyond that, off limits. So, it's they're pretty clear. They're pretty open about where you can and can't go. It's a cool place to be. And watchtower, I love guard towers, guard shacks, stuff like that. It's I don't know why I have a weird attraction to these buildings, these types of structures, and it's pretty cool. For me, anyway, it's a neat looking structure. Nothing too special about it, really, other than the ivy covering it. I think the ivy's really cool, but not much to see as far as architecture goes. It's not very fancy. It's pretty plain, pretty simple. But I love watchtowers. I hope you do too, because I just rambled on it about maybe 5 or 6 minutes now. So behind me here, you see the Western State Hospital official cemetery. And most of these headstones were marked putting the patient's identification number right here on the headstone. And as you can see from this up-close shot, it's been completely worn off. So all these patients, every Pretty much all the bodies that have been buried here are completely anonymous now. They'll never be known to man again, unfortunately. We'll never know who's all buried here, but one thing we will know, and we do know, is how many souls are buried here. Over 3,000. Over 3,000 from the time this hospital opened in 1832 to the time it closed in 1976. It's incredible to me that they were able to get away with doing this. And not only that, as you can see from the shot directly behind camera there, we are extremely close to the hospital campus proper. So I don't understand why they would build a cemetery so very close to the campus, especially the dormitories. Those two buildings that you saw facing this direction are all patient dormitories. So they could easily look out their window and see people being buried here easily. And as you can see, well, you can't really tell now, but you can see further up the hill here, this headstones either look like they're starting to fall or they're not even there at all. Well, that's because they have mostly sunk into the ground. If you look at this particular headstone, we'll just use this as our example, you can see that it looks like a normal headstone. When this hospital cemetery was first built, the headstones came up to here. So over the time between the 1800s and the time it closed in 1976, these headstones have sunk this far. And the reason that they use patient numbers instead of patients' names is because they saw it as public discreditation to use their actual name, and it kept the family name out of the public eye, because back then it was considered to be, shall we say, not acceptable to have a family member at this facility or at any mental health facility. It was extremely frowned upon to have a mentally ill family member. It was not something that they appreciated, and that's why they use patient numbers instead of patients' names. And if you look right up here behind me here, about 3 rows back, you see a standard looking headstone that you would see in a cemetery today. Well, some of the family members have been identified because some of the records were not either destroyed or lost, and they were able to identify their family members and replace the old monotonous headstone with the proper headstone. And every time I've come back here, I've been back here 3 times already. Every time I've come back here, it gets more and more sobering. Every time I come back here, it's like it feels larger. It feels there's more headstones than there were before, even though they're just the same. It just is, it's unfathomable to me that this many people walked into this facility and never walked out the front doors again. They came in through the front doors and they left through the morgue doors. So behind me here you can see that I am standing on one of the rooftops of one of the ward dormitories, and I thought this would be a good place to film my outro. And you can see, well, not really, but the sun is just starting to go down after a full day's worth of shooting on the property. And it's been an incredible day, an incredible time here, and I want to give a special thank you to the Blackburn Inn for allowing me to come out and film. It's been a real blast. I have been wanting to do this for 8 years, and now that I've finally done it, I can honestly say I wish it hadn't. I can honestly say that I don't want it to end. It's been a wonderful thing, and I hope you all enjoyed it. I know the video can be a bit rambly at times, but I really hope you enjoyed it. My name is Cameron Schultz, and I really want to thank you so much for watching this video. And if you'd like to come and stay here one day, please reach out to the Blackburn Inn. They'd be happy to accommodate you. And yes, please consider coming and staying here to help support the restoration of these buildings. It's a beautiful place to stay. Downtown Staunton's a wonderful place. You can see some of that from up here as well, which I don't know if that'll be on screen, but it's a really beautiful place to come. So My name is Cameron Schultz, and once again, I want to thank you so much for watching. And yeah, please drop it a like and leave a comment and let me know if this is a place that you would come and stay. I'm Cameron Schultz. Thanks for watching.